All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring a seriously fascinating concept that honestly might just be the ultimate cure for modern burnout. We're going to look at the psychology of the fool. We'll be tracing its roots from ancient tarot cards all the way to clinical Jungian psychology. And as you'll see, embracing your inner idiot might actually be the smartest thing you ever do.
The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. William Shakespeare really hit the nail on the head with this one. Look, we live in a super rigid, highly structured world that is absolutely obsessed with appearing wise, efficient, and productive. We take ourselves so incredibly seriously trying to conform to these societal standards that we essentially turn ourselves into little cogs in a frenetic machine. We completely lose our playfulness, which, let's be real, is a basic human need.
So, ask yourself right now, have you become too afraid of looking foolish to actually live your life? Think about the last time you were terrified to ask an obvious question in a meeting, or maybe you hesitated to try a new hobby just because you didn't want to look stupid. That paralyzing fear of judgment, that desperate need to always appear competent, that is exactly what we're unpacking today. Here are the symptoms of our modern machine: workaholism, forced conformity, an obsession with efficiency, and a total loss of spontaneity. We are collectively exhausted by this endless hustle. It leads straight to boredom and burnout, completely robbing us of our authenticity. The absolute best antidote to this modern wasteland? We need to give the fool archetype some much-needed space in our lives. Think of it as a renegade faction in our minds, there to bring us fresh ideas and new energy.
Okay, moving right along to Section 1, Stepping Off the Cliff, Tarot and the Unconscious.
Take a look at this number, 0. In the classic tarot deck, the Fool is assigned the number 0, and that is definitely not a mistake. The power of 0 is inherent in its circular form. It's kind of like the ancient Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. It represents eternity, endless return, and literally limitless potential. The Fool represents that primeval state where we all lived before falling into the harsh, structured reality of consciousness. And this concept forms the basis of what's called the Fool's Journey. In tarot, the Major Arcana cards basically act as a picture book representing the lifelong psychological initiation from card 0 to the final world card. The Fool is heroic here because he's the one actually willing to jump from the comfort of the ordinary world directly into the vast, unpredictable unknown. I mean, he's depicted standing on the edge of a cliff, looking up at the sky, totally unbothered by the fact that he's about to step right into the abyss. What's really fascinating is how this tarot sequence perfectly maps to the classic hero's journey. You've got the departure into the unknown, defeating the dragon, which usually represents trauma, gathering the gold, and finally the return. To grow, an old, comfortable aspect of yourself literally has to undergo a psychological death to give birth to a more capable whole self. You face your dragon, gather the gold of wisdom, and return to share it. But remember, absolutely nothing starts without taking that first, foolish step. So, let's journey deeper into Section 2, the Trials, Healing the Fisher King. Let's look at the ancient Arthurian legend of Parsifal. Here, a young, innocent fool must find the Grail Castle to heal the wounded Fisher King. At the core of this myth, the Fisher King is completely paralyzed by a severe psychological wound. Because of this inward agony, his external kingdom has become entirely barren. And wow, if that isn't a perfect metaphor for the burnout and sterility we experience in modern life when we lose touch with our inner vitality. To really understand this psychologically, we've got to turn to the legendary Carl Jung and his concept of the inferior function. Jung used this term for the most undeveloped, unadapted, and frankly ridiculous part of your personality. In our myth, Parsifal is this inferior function. He's just an innocent, naive adolescent fool. Yet the prophecy stated that only an innocent fool could heal the Fisher King, and he does it simply by asking a very specific, obvious question. So think about how this dynamic plays out inside our own minds every single day. On one side, you have the wounded king, paralyzed, painfully self-conscious, and cut off from his inner capacity by rigid intellect. On the other side, you have the innocent fool, unadapted, intuitive, and totally willing to ask the obvious question. The tragedy here is that we constantly try to heal our burnout with more intellect, when in reality, only your inner fool can touch that deep psychological wound and set you free. All right, let's transition right into Section 3, the transformation, Jung and individuation. Now, we need to make a really vital distinction between the trickster and the fool. The trickster uses the mind. They're deceptive and they laugh at others. But the fool uses the heart.
They're innocent and they laugh with others. The fool isn't trying to trick you. When they make a joke, they're perfectly fine being the punchline. This genuine vulnerability breaks the ice, drops our heavy social masks, and creates space for real, profound connection.
And this brings us right to Jung's massive concept of individuation. Individuation is this psychological and spiritual journey toward complete self-realization and wholeness. Jung basically viewed the Tarot's Fool's Journey as the exact blueprint for this process. It's a lifelong path where we literally have to confront and integrate our most ridiculous, despised parts to become complete. You just can't reach wholeness by only accepting the polished, professional parts of yourself.
Think about how Jung mapped out the psyche geometrically. Check this out. Your ego, the part of you that goes to work, pays the bills, stresses out, is just a tiny dot in the center of consciousness. But your true self, that's the vast circle that encompasses everything, including your deep unconscious. And the Fool acts as that absolutely crucial bridge connecting the dot to the circle. Without the Fool, your ego is just stuck, isolated and cut off from the massive potential of your entire mind.
But hey, let's be clear, this transformation isn't always a walk in the park. The Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky explored this in his novel The Idiot. It is better to be unhappy and know the worst than to be happy in a fool's paradise. His protagonist is an entirely innocent, open-hearted fool thrust into a super-corrupt society. Dostoevsky really highlights the stark, brutal contrast between blissful ignorance and crushing reality. Which forces us to ask a really heavy question. Which would you choose? To know the truth and be unhappy, or to live blissfully in a fool's paradise? The process of individuation demands that we shed our comforting illusions and confront reality, even when it hurts. So is that painful awareness worth sacrificing a comfortable, oblivious life? Well, according to the psychology of the fool, yes, it absolutely is. Okay, let's bring this all back to your daily life. Section 4, The Return, Embracing Your Inner Fool. In our day-to-day lives, we desperately need to adopt Shoshin, which is a beautiful Zen Buddhist concept meaning beginner's mind. It prioritizes limitless possibilities over closed-minded expertise. As the saying goes, in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are very few. When you claim to be the absolute expert, you shut down. Cultivating a beginner's mind means intentionally channeling your inner fool to stay open, curious, and receptive to the world. Just listen to the voices in your own head the next time you try something new. Look at this comparison. On one side, your inner conformist is judgmental, plays it safe, and is perfectly content with superficiality. It's whispering, be careful, everyone's gonna laugh at you. But your inner fool, that voice is open-minded, energetic, and completely unafraid of failure. It knows that overthinking leads to paralysis, and acting on instinct is what actually leads to liberation.
If the fool would persist in his folly, he would become wise. William Blake brilliantly summed up the ultimate psychological paradox right there. True wisdom isn't about never making a mistake, guys. It's about being courageous enough to look like a complete idiot in the pursuit of truth. Think about it. Literally every genius or inventor was looked at as a total fool at the beginning of their journey.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought. Will you take the leap into the unknown or stay safely standing on the edge? You're right there on the cliff. The ordinary world is behind you and the vast potential of the unconscious is right in front of you. Are you ready to step off the cliff of certainty and let your inner fool lead the way to true self-discovery? Because honestly, until you're willing to play the fool, you'll never... All right.